Hey everyone, I am Aidan Walls. This channel is dedicated to retro gaming and retro handhelds, so if that's something that you're into, please consider subscribing. This is a complete setup guide for the Retroid Pockets. I know there are already a few videos out there, so I just wanted to add my 2 cents. You know, this is a long video. There are little bits and pieces that you can cross-reference and go back to in the future. There are timestamps below, so you can jump to the pieces that are relevant to you. There's a lot to get through, so let's get straight into it. So firstly, you will need an SD card. I have a 128 gig card. It's sitting by my laptop, but I actually recommend a 256 gig or a 512 gigabyte card for the bigger systems like Dreamcast, GameCube, PS1, PS2. You'll need a USB-C cable to connect to your laptop to transfer ROMs, and then obviously a computer with an internet connection and also internet connection for the device itself. Alright, so the initial setup of Android, I have reset my device so that we can get this going. Alright, so welcome to the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. We can press R1 to move on to the next step. English, press R1, connect to the internet. So I'm going to go here. Just switch this on to connect to my work internet. There we go. I'm going to go back. Alright, so I say next. Alright, so select your time zone and just enable Google Play services if you have some kind of privacy issue or whatever. Even if you don't want to enable that, you don't have to. It'll give you the Google Play Store, and there's a lot of things available on the Google Play Store that we actually need for setting this device up. Okay, now here is where things get a little bit specific. I've already been using this device, and I started by installing all of these, and I've been using it for about a month or two. So what I would recommend is some of them have been compiled by Retroid. Some of them were good, some of them didn't make a difference. So ScumVM, let's go down to ScumVM. Not that I actually played a lot of these games, but ScumVM, you can download it here. The next one is Redream. There's Redream. You can download the PPSSPP that they've compiled for us. The Mupen64, there, that one we can download here. And then Moonlight. These are the ones that I found set up by Retroid were actually useful, like they'd already set up the controller and all that. And I'm guessing from the Retroid Pocket 3 to the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, they made some improvements, and it's better than the initial setup is better than it was before. Okay, so the rest I think we should get from the Play Store or from the website. So we're going to say next over there, and now it's going to install all of those. Alright, so we're going to select the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus as the launcher, but you'll see as we move along, I'm going to use the Retroid Pocket Launcher for one thing, and then we're going to move on to Daijisho, because Daijisho is just a lot better. Alright, so we're going to select there the RP3 Plus launcher, and let's say next. Okay, so configuration is complete. So the next thing we can do is just actually check if Android is updated. So let's just go to the updater. Alright, so there's no update for Android. And like I said, we're going to start off with the Retroid Launcher. And at this point, I'm actually going to put my SD card in, because what I want to do is I want to use the Retroid Pocket Launcher to set up my SD card and my internal storage. Okay, so I've inserted the SD card. I think because I've used this card previously, it's already labeled RP3 Plus. It hasn't asked me to do this, but you can either have the option of setting it as internal storage or an external storage. I like to use it as external storage. This used to be an issue with Android and retro gaming and using these retro games for Android, but it doesn't seem to have been an issue for me. So I've just set it up as external storage so that I can remove it and put it into my computer if need be. For some reason, it didn't ask me to do that right now, and I think it's because I have used the card previously. So now what I want to do is I want to go to this setup button, and I want to create ROM folders. So default internal directory, I want to create ROM folders there, successfully created, and then create ROM folders, default SD card directory, successfully created. Now if I go out of here and I go into the files browser, and here let's select, this is the internal storage. You'll see now there's a Retroid Pocket Games folder, and it's got BIOS, ports, and ROMs. And then if we go to the external storage here, RP3 Plus, it's got a Retroid Pocket Games folder, BIOS, ports, ROMs. That just makes it neatly for us, ready to go. And if you go into ROMs, it's all the ROM folders set up for you. So that just saves you a little bit of time and gets you going immediately. That's it as far as the Retroid Launcher is concerned, because I'm going to move straight into getting us set up with Daijisho. So the list of systems that you can emulate is quite extensive. If we go in here It's populated for us, and I've also made a table on my written website notes. You can just see there's a lot of systems that are compatible with Android, and they've all been listed here and on your SD card as well. You can go through there if you like, and if there are any systems that you hadn't thought of, you can go and get some games for them. There's Nintendo DS, which is great. It emulates all of these. Wii doesn't emulate all Wii games, but you can do it. Sega 32X. There's a bunch. There's 3DS as well, which is quite cool. 3DS over there. There's a lot of systems that can emulate. Some people ask me about ROM files and file types. There were a lot of good articles online about the ROMs and the ROM file types that you can use. I like to use AmbiLX's website for this to reference file types. Now, that's a Linux specific reference. I have put a link in my video notes on my website about this. It's a link to the AmbiLX website. It gives you the systems and the file types that work with those systems. But I know, for instance, ISO files don't work, but those don't work on Linux either. So just have a look there. You should come right. I'm going to load all my ROMs now from my laptop, and then I'll show you some of the systems that I use. So here is my USB-C cable. We're going to get plugged into my laptop, and we're going to get our ROMs loaded onto the RP3 Plus. Plug into the laptop, and then over here your USB-C port, and you just plug in there. Now it's going to ask you if you want no data transfer or file transfers. Let's say file transfer. Okay, here is where, this is what I was talking about. Here is the SD card setup. Do we want it as handheld storage, or do we want it as portable storage? So I'm going to say portable storage. That way I can unplug it and put it in my laptop from time to time. This allows me to install apps and stuff onto the SD card. I just find this to be a simpler solution, and I haven't had any trouble with it. Okay, you'll see on the left here, Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and then the internal shared storage and the RP3 Plus. That is our SD card plugged into the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and I'm going to go here. Oh, my drive is getting really full. This is where I've got all my games. BIOS files, I'm unfortunately not allowed to tell you where to get those, but what I do with the BIOS is I drag them. So let's go into, this is our internal storage that I'm navigated to now on the right here. I go to the BIOS section, I go to all my BIOS files, and I've got a comprehensive set of BIOS files, and I just move them over. And then what I'm going to do is on the external, I'm also going to put it there. I think it's only necessary to put the BIOS files on the side of the device where you've got ROMs. I'm putting my ROMs in both the internal and external storage because you've got 128 gigs of storage on your device. You may as well use it. Select all the BIOS and drag it onto the external storage as well, into the BIOS folder. Okay, so while those are loading, I'm going to go to where I've got my ROMs on my computer, and I'm going to get all my 8-bit and 16-bit games and put them on the internal storage of my Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. Okay, we're going to go to that Retroid Pocket Games folder that we created. I'm going to go to ROMs, and now I'm going to start looking for my sort of low file size systems. So Atari 7800, now we can look here, there's Atari 7800. And here's some of my Atari 7800 ROMs. To be honest, I just play Galaga on Atari 7800. Okay, so I'm just going to do that exact same process for all my 8-bit to 16-bit games. We're just going to speed this section up. Quickly, just to mention here, something that I forgot to mention when I was talking about BIOS is with Neogeo, you'll see there's a zipped Neogeo file. That is actually the Neogeo BIOS file. That needs to go in the folder where you've stored the games. Otherwise, you'll have issues running those Neogeo games. Cool, you'll see my internal storage, those low systems didn't really make a dent, but I'm going to add some Android games on there, so we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to put all the bigger systems now on the external drive. I'm going to start, I actually forgot to put N64 on before I did this setup, so I'm going to put some N64 games on here. Okay, so now with the incredible work of the magic of video editing, I have everything loaded. One thing you need to do is, this is just a recommendation from my side, is to make sure that you've got your BIOS files here on the onboard memory and on the external memory. So I've stored it on both. If you're doing it like I'm doing it, we're using internal and external memory. Then if you move games around or whatever, you're not going to have an issue now that you forgot to move the BIOS file over. All the BIOS files are on both storages. And then I have put my ROMs in different places. So I've got mostly the 8-bit and 16-bit ROMs here. So you'll find my Atari 7800 is here. But then if I go onto my external storage, the bigger games such as GameCube are here. So now what I'm going to do is download all my emulators. I don't think I've downloaded any. I've just downloaded those ones that I said have been compiled by Retroid in the factory that I have found a little bit useful. Is the Nintendo 64, the PSP one, the ScumVM I just loaded. I don't think I actually have any ScumVM games. Redream for Dreamcast. That is it, I think. So now we need to download the rest. So if you go to my written notes, I have it all listed there where you can get them or where you should get them and any comments about each one. So now that all the emulators are downloaded, I just want to note a few sort of housekeeping things before we move on to actually setting up the emulators. And that is to go into the settings, your Android settings, and Retroid have actually made a section called Handheld Settings. I want you to go to Input and say press the home button accidentally. That'll be enabled. So I want you to disable that so that your home button will automatically exit when you press it once, because I've never double pressed it. So I don't feel like that's necessary. The next one is controller style. This is up to you, but I'm using this device mostly for PlayStation and PSP games. And so the Xbox setup makes more sense for me, where the B button is actually your X button and the A button is actually your circle button. That's what I've done there. It does complicate things a little bit when setting up, but I'm going to do the following setup as if you've got it set up as an Xbox controller. So there's a few little quirks as we go through it that I'll note so that you don't make any mistakes. If you are annoyed by that side menu, it puts a little line here on the side. This floating icon, just disable it and that will disable that side menu. I've already done it, so it's not appearing now. But if you want to disable that little line in the side menu, you can do it that way. All right, so let's get into setting up each emulator. The main task between all these emulators is to make sure you connect the app where the relevant ROMs are and then where they are on your device. So that's one of the main tasks to do in each of these emulators. Then you need to make sure the app recognizes your controller inputs. That's another important one. And then there are some quirks for each emulator as we go through them, and I'll show you those. I've created this part of the guide to try and make these emulators have similar shortcuts. It doesn't work throughout the system, but there's a few shortcuts that I've made the same on some of the emulators just to make life a little bit easier for you. A lot of these emulators have a swipe from left feature to open the menu in game, the emulator menu. So if all else fails, use that. Okay, so here are my specific tips for each emulator. I've kind of scoured the internet and various references, spreadsheets and GitHub pages, information within the apps themselves, put it all together just step by step. So if you follow this step-by-step guide, I recommend setting your device to Xbox settings if you want to just get the ultimate experience that I've created. Otherwise, if you've got the retro button layout, I'll show you what to do throughout the setup. The first one that I'm going to do is Yabasanshiro. I've bought the Pro version. There's a few things that won't pop up now because I've obviously set it up already. The first thing is to press start. There'll be a start button as you open up, and then there'll be another pop-up, just say accept, and then press the 3 stripes at the top left to get started. And then we're going to go to settings. Then we're going to go to select game directory. So that's over there. I've already done it, so I'm just going to delete it quickly. Let's make sure I'm deleting the right one. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to say add. Navigate to where our ROMs are. As I've mentioned, mine are on my external drive for the bigger systems. Go to that Retro Pocket Games folder that we've created. Go to ROMs. Look for Sega Saturn for Yabasanshiro, Sega Saturn, and we say use this folder. So this will now reference that folder as a game folder in the system. Now we're going to scroll through these. The next thing to do is CPU core needs to be new dynamic, so that's correct. Someone said disable CPU affinity. I've left it on. You can maybe play around with that. The video core, the recommended video core that I found was OpenGL. It was preset to Vulkan. Those two you can play around with and you can see which performs better. And it does vary between game. I just haven't found a reference online of like a spreadsheet or whatever of what games perform better on each back end, but you can play around with that to improve performance. Rendering resolution, again, you can reduce this to 720p to improve performance on the system. Aspect ratio, just left to original. Here we need need to set up the controller on the device. So we're going to go choose. This will not be selected, so we're going to say Xbox controller. Now we're going to edit the key map. Now this, I've put each individual one for you on the written guide to guide you through this. So it's up, down, left, right. Now the L trigger is in fact L2, so we're going to press L2. R trigger is R2, and start is just start. A is going to be Y. So this is a bit confusing, so just follow my written guide. B is B. C is going to be your A button. X is actually going to be L1 over here. Y is going to be X. Z is going to be R1. So analog X is your horizontal axis. You'd need to do this one a little bit quickly because otherwise it registers twice. So okay, analog X, analog Y. Then analog L is L2. We're going to double up on these. So analog R is R2. Now we've already used the start button, so we're going to use select as our menu button. And that's our key mapping done. Edit on-screen pad. No, we're not going to do that. I'm just going to say here, hide status bar, navigation bar. Then we're going to go down to sound. Sound engine, it was recommended to me to use legacy. So we're going to use legacy because sometimes on these high-end systems you get sound stuttering. So maybe that's going to help with that. Synchronization, real time. This I haven't tested, but these are according to the GitHub page that I recommended in the description below. Proven to work on other systems. So I'm going to trust it for this. Updating. And now those settings are saved. For this system, to improve performance, I would say use PAL games for not the US, because it uses 50 hertz, 50 frames per second, so it uses less processing power to run the game. Close any background apps, so open up here, have a look if any apps are running in the background, close them up. You see there I've got a game running in the background. Just close all of that stuff and then you should be good to go. It will improve your performance. And then if push comes to shove, I think I've set my screen resolution here to just native. But if you want to go in here and change the screen resolution to 720p, you can do that. Moving on to Vita 3K. I'm just going to talk about Vita 3K because it's a bit of a mission to set up, and I deleted it in order to make a video, so it's not set up now. But just to say that Vitamin encoded ROMs do not work on this. It has to be, I can't remember the name of it, I'll put it on the screen now, but it has to be that specific encoding for it to work, and then .zip files are the easiest. So I've found one ROM so far that I can get to run on this Vita 3K. I need to actually get my games, the physical games, and encode them on my laptop, and that should work quite well. Anyway, so Vita 3K, very new, but very exciting. Now we're going to look at Redream. So I've recommended that you download the Redream from the Retroid Pocket startup. What I just want to quickly show you is how to go back to that setup, that original setup of the device, to download any of these systems. So if you've already set it up and now you want to go back and download one of the systems, you go into handheld settings, advanced, re-enter setup wizard. Just tells you that you're not going to lose your information. Press OK and you can go back in there and download the systems, redo the startup of the device. Anyway, so now we're going to go into Redream. I haven't paid for this yet. I promise I will pay for it, but we're going to go into the light version. Redream is your Dreamcast emulator. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go to games. Now I've obviously already set it up, so I'll just put the guide on the screen now. It's to go to library, add directory. In my case, it's on the RP3 Plus on my SD card. Go to the Retroid Pocket Games folder that we've created. Go to ROMs and go to Dreamcast and say add this folder. So that's how you get, and it'll immediately just populate. Okay, so now we're going to go to input. What we need to do is go to port A and make sure that input device is set to Xbox controller. I don't trust this. I want to make it the way I know it's going to work. Also, I want to make sure that it hasn't swapped my A and B buttons or my X and circle buttons around. And so we are going to map this ourselves. So what you need to do is select each option and use the key that you want to map to that thing. So left joystick up. So we need to press our left joystick up. There we go. Left joystick down. There we go. Left joystick left. So we go left. Left joystick right. So we go right. D-pad up. D-pad down. D-pad left. D-pad right. Left trigger. For the left trigger, we are going to say L1, so this button. For the right trigger, we're going to say R1. For the A button, we're going to say A button. For the B button, we're going to say B button. So in the system, it's acknowledging B as our sort of enter button. But now, because we've mapped it in this emulator the other way around, we've mapped this as A, mapped this as B. Now these buttons are going to react differently. Now I need to press the A button to enter here instead of pressing the B button because I've swapped them around. A little confusing, but yeah, so once you've mapped them around correctly in here, in the emulator, it's going to act as an A and B button instead of a X and circle button like a PSP. X button is normal, Y button is normal, start button is normal. Turbo we're going to skip. Show VMU, I think that's the FPS, we're not going to enable that. Main menu. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this to L2. Now, the reason for that is because there's a few emulators that I'm able to do this with, and so it creates a bit of a unified system so that through some of the emulators at least, I have L2 as my menu button. An exit emulator, we're not going to do that because we have the home button and we have the menu. We can just press menu and exit. Okay, now we're going to go into video. Aspect ratio, you can set to 16:9 or 4:3 or stretch. There are cheats for some games, so you can go into the games and do a cheat, a 16:9 cheat. Personally, I like to set this to 16:9. You can leave it at 4:3 and only have 16:9 for the ones that actually have a cheat for it. Frame skip, I like to have as auto. Okay, now we're going to go back to games. Let's say, for instance, I'm going to be like you and I'm going to do a 4:3 because I want to show you the cheats that are available. I've set my video to 4:3. I'm going into games and let's, if you've got it, open Crazy Taxi. You'll see Crazy Taxi is opening at 16:9, even though I've set my system to 4:3. That's because if you go in here and you go to Edit Cheats, there's a widescreen cheat and I've set it to on. So that'll be pending a restart and I'll go back to 4:3. But this has actually been coded by the guys that made the emulator to be a widescreen and it's going to look really nice. I've set on for lots of money per passenger and infinite game time, just because I'm not a huge Crazy Taxi player, but I do enjoy like messing around with it. Okay, so let's move on to the next emulator, which is Drastic. Drastic is a paid emulator. You have to pay for it. I've paid for most of my apps like I showed you. I haven't paid for Redream yet, just because I'm having to pay for all these apps doing this video. There's my Drastic. So the first thing that we need to do is change the save state folder. So we're going to change options. We need to go into General. And we need to scroll to System Directory. Let's have a look here. System Directory. And we say Scoped Storage Folder. So I've already navigated. You'll see the RP3 Plus, Retro Pocket Games, ROMs, Nintendo DS. So I wanted to save my save states and my system folders there so that I've got control of where my save states are. If I ever want to move the save states to somewhere, I know where they are. So that's the first thing. Now we're going to change some of our options. The next one is virtual gamepad. So let's go back and we go to virtual gamepad. And it says you always show start and select buttons. We're going to disable that. So that would have been enabled if you're opening it for the first time. Now we're going to go back and we're going to set our external controller. If you go here, you want to select Xbox controller. If you don't see Xbox controller here, just select no mapping and we are actually going to map it now. Okay, so now tap map control. X will be X, Y will be Y, B will be B, A will be A, R will be R1, L will be L1, start will be start, select will be select. Okay, then D-pad's up, then right, then down, then left. And that's that section. Now we're going to go to map special. Screen swap, I'm going to set to L3. Fast forward, we're going to skip. Quick save, I'm setting to R3. Quick load, I'm setting to R2. Open menu, like the other system where we had L2 as our menu button. L2, our menu button here. Up left, we're going to skip. Up right, we're going to skip. And we're going to skip everything from here on out. Now I'm going to go back and I'm just going to go to general settings and I want to make a couple more changes. We're going to look for autosave. I want to set that to on, pause, suspend. So whenever we close the game or pause it or whatever, it's going to autosave, create an autosave for us. Then I also want to disable save state override needs confirmation. So it's going to confirm that every single time you try to save. So save state override needs confirmation. going to disable that. Okay, then what we're also going to do is menu button position. We're actually going to say hidden. So we don't want the on-screen menu button there because we've actually mapped a key to our menu. Okay, so now we're going to load a game. All right, so I've already navigated to my folder. You just need to find your folder where your games are stored. This is not really necessary because you're going to be able to link this all up with the front end later. But I just want to show you a few more settings once you're in game. So you remember we did a special button map. We did the L2 to be the menu button. So now all we need to do is press L2 to open the Drastic menu. You can use your L3 button, this one here, to toggle the screens. So you'll see that there's your map. So now obviously the way that I've done the screen layout, it's the wrong way around because that's actually where you're playing, and then you can do that. So now the other thing I just want to show you is screen layouts. So you can toggle between all the different screen layouts. Let's go in here, select screen layouts. Okay, so there it actually shows you a picture. Now there you can do the landscape one. So that'll do it like that. You might prefer that. And then you can swap the screens like that. Or you can do the landscape one. This is the one I like because then you've got a small screen and you can choose which is your dominant screen. You can do portrait, but that's for vertical. You can do landscape full screen, and then it's actually just a big screen like that. That's also an option if you like that sort of thing. This one is just 2 full screens. So this is actually quite nice. Some of these DS games, you don't need the second screen that much once you're playing. So then this is quite a nice one. But I personally think that the landscape X1 is the way to go. And you can now switch between those. And then remember, we've mapped our quick save to R3 and the quick load R2. We load the save there. So that's that. Make a note of your shortcuts on that game system and you're ready to roll. Performance issues with Drastic, nothing really. I think all you really want to do is close background apps to make it perform correctly, and you can drop the screen resolution in the app if you want to improve performance. All right, so now PPSSPP. So let's go into settings and let's go through my favorite settings. Vulkan works for most of the games. If you go to the spreadsheets that I've put later in the video notes on my website, you'll see that some games do work better with OpenGL, but my 2 favorite games that I've been playing, Assassin's Creed and God of War, work best with Vulkan. So again, you can change that back in to improve the performance of a game. You can just use that spreadsheet as reference. Buffered rendering, you can disable buffered or enable buffered, skip buffered effects. You can do that, but it creates a lot of graphical anomalies. So if you're trying to play a higher end game and you really want to play it, you can try just that skip buffered effects, but I don't use it. Frame skip, I put frame skip to auto. If I really am struggling, then I go number of frames and I increase that number of frames or put a percentage. Full screen, I actually prefer not to have full screen, and then my preset is to 3x resolution. Then on the left we can tap controls. On-screen touch controls, they will be enabled by default. I disable those. And now we want to do the controller mapping. So at the top here we tap on controller mapping. So depending on whether you are using the retro controller setting, remember I mentioned this can get confusing. If you've got the system set to retro or Xbox, you might want to just make sure that your circle button is set to circle and that your X button is set to X. So X will be the B button. It shows B and A because the whole system has been reversed. So it is a little confusing, but it works out in the end. Everything else should be okay. You'll note that the pause button is set to L2. So remember I set some of the other systems to L2. This is why, so that it can all do the same thing. Yeah, some people like to use fast forward. You can map your R2 to fast forward. But I'm going to show you why I haven't mapped the fast forward button, because I want to create that uniformed effect. So my save state, I've set that to R3. And then my load states, I've set that to R2. So R3, R2. So now I've got the same save and load save states as some of the other systems. So let's open God of War. So what we want to do is we want to tweak the settings a little bit. You can see it looks stunning. I think it's currently playing at 3x, and I actually do play it mostly at 3x. But for this example, what I want to do, so let's go into settings, And let's scroll down. We want to improve the performance. So we're going to take that 3x resolution. We're going to make it 2x resolution. We're going to go back and we're going to create game config. So now what this does is it's created a configuration for that specific game. So if we go into Assassin's Creed, which I definitely have set to 3x resolution, and we go into game settings, we scroll down, that is set to a 3x resolution. So you can tweak the games as you go along, depending on performance. If it's OpenGL, for the back end, you can save those per game as you go through it, and you go, I'm busy playing this game and it's not playing very well. You look online and you find the settings you want. You can save them as a game config. So again, just to reiterate, for performance, close all your background apps, switch to OpenGL backend if Vulkan isn't working very well. Check that spreadsheet that I shared later in my video notes. Drop the resolution, 3x, 2x, 1x, and increase your frame skip amount. So increase the percentage of your frame skip or the number of your frames skipped. Next is Duckstation. In the beginning, obviously I now have this all set up, but you'll need to say allow to allow your media, and then there's another pop-up for update notes. Just say yes to that. Then press the back arrow, and then on the screen you'll see add game directory. Go to your directory wherever your games are kept, and just say allow. Immediately what you'll want to do is try start a game. What you'll need to do then is locate because it's going to immediately say, I need a BIOS file. Locate your scph1001.bin file, your BIOS file, just tap on it. Then it should be set up with the BIOS. Now we go to our 3 stripes and we do our settings. So I want to go to app settings, and I want to go to the enhancements. So we go here at the top, you'll see enhancements, and I want to set the resolution scale to 5x, which is 1080p. It sounds like a lot, but it's 1080p, but that will make the games on this emulator look really good on the PS1 emulator. Next, under enhancements, we're going to scroll down and we're going to go to the widescreen hack. So what this will do is try to stretch the game as far as possible without making it look gross. So it'll do some widescreen hacks. If you don't like widescreen hacks, you don't have to do that one. Right, next we're going to go to general. So just pull this across and go to general. And then we just want to enable save state on exit. So this will be disabled by default. Just enable that so that when you exit a game, it does a save state. And so it will either start up from there when you open the game, or you just need to, restore the save, load the save, and you'll have that save state ready. So that's a nice little feature. I'm trying to enable that on all the systems as we go through it. The next one we want to do is controller settings. We're going to go to here to settings, and we're going to, for touchscreen controller view, it'll be enabled somewhere here. We're going to say none because we don't want any touchscreen controllers. The next thing we're going to do is go to our port 1 controller type, and we're going to say analog controller dual shock. Now we're going to do perform automatic mapping. We're going to say Xbox controller. So that's going to try and map the controller correctly. So I'm just going to go down here, and again, I just want to double check that my X button is set to, see if it changes. No, it doesn't change. 97. So that's fine. That's set correctly. Now we're going to go to hotkeys. So now I'm going to try and create those menu buttons that I had before. Now I know that PS1 doesn't use the L2 and R2 buttons. It's going to be using these shoulder buttons. And so for open pause menu, that's going to be the emulator menu. We're going to press L2. So now we know that we've got that menu button like we have on all the other systems that we've set up. So we want to do load from selected slot. So that is a load save state. We're going to do R2. We're going to say save to selected slot. We're going to do R3 if you want to. So you can save here. You can save this with a profile name. I've already saved it as Aiden. It'll save your profile for future reference. So you can go here to this little folder icon, and I can select Aiden, and it will just enable all those things that I just showed you. For the Duckstation emulator, for performance, you can use PAL games to improve performance. You can close all your background apps, and you can reduce the screen resolution. All those things will help with performance on the system. The next one is Dolphin for handheld. I decided to go with Retroid's Dolphin for handheld. There were just a few things that I liked about it that made it a lot easier, and I want to set these things up that makes it as easy as possible for the people watching my channel. So I've downloaded Dolphin for handheld. When it opens, it'll ask you to get access to your photos. You just say allow. You'll press this plus button You'll navigate to your ROM folder and you'll say allow access to this folder. You just say use this folder and it'll automatically load your games, put thumbnails in, the whole thing. Okay, so let's get Dolphin set up. We're going to go to settings, this cog button on the top right, and we're going to say general, and we're going to say enable save states on. So we need to scroll down here and find enable save states. Make sure that enable save states is on. Okay, so next we're going to go to graphics, and the first thing that we're actually going to change is to set this to Vulkan. So I was trying to play Metroid Prime last night and I didn't have the set to Vulkan. I had it set to OpenGL. So we're going to test that now and see if this improves it a little bit. Then we're going to go down to enhancements. We just got to look for enhancements here. We're going to set the internal resolution to 0.5 resolution. GameCube does struggle on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, so we set it to a half resolution, and that's why I decided to use the one for handheld, because it does allow half resolution. So we're just going to save there. We're going to go back into settings. We're going to go to paths, and I'm actually going to, I've enabled search subs folders for game files because I actually found my Wii games were in folders, and so that just, if you do have it in a folder, it will find the game for you. Then tap the little save icon at the top. Now those settings are saved. All right, now we're going to map our controller. There's a little controller icon over here. We're going to go to GameCube controller and we're going to go to emulated. And I went through and I just mapped these. All these are the same. So A is A, B is B, X is X, Y is Y. Z is L3. So L3 is this one. Push your L3 button in. At least that's what I set it to. Start is just the start button. And then your control stick is your left analog stick. So up, down, left, right. So that's what you would do there. C stick is your right analog stick. So up, down, left, right. That's what the C stick is. This is all in my written notes. Triggers. So L, L1, R, R1, L, analog stick, L2. R analog is R2. Then your D-pad, obviously up, down, left, right, and that's it. So this uses most of the buttons, and so I can't map L2 as the menu, the in-game menu. We're going to have to use the swipe left here for the menu. Save that again. Now here for performance, like I just mentioned, you can switch Vulkan and OpenGL. You can use PAL games where possible. You can close all your background apps and you can reduce the screen resolution. Here I've got it to 0.5, so we are limited. Anyway, yep, so enjoy that. Hope that was helpful to you. Moving on to Citra, the Retroid version of Citra. I've now downloaded the Retroid version of Citra. The first thing that will happen is it'll pop up with a screen, just say OK, then tap allow for your photos and media, and then press the plus at the top right. And then what you want to do to find your ROMs, if you are on the external SD card, is press the two dots here, then press them again. My SD card is these random numbers here. So there you go there, and you scroll down, Retroid Pocket Games, ROMs. Citra is your 3DS emulator, so whoops, there, 3DS, say OK. And there are all my 3DS games. Now press the little CPU cog at the top right. Here we're going to go screen layout, and I'm going to do the side screen, and you'll see what that looks like now. Internal resolution, I've set that to a 2x resolution. 3DS seems to be playing quite well. I guess it also depends what games you're playing. All right, so now go out of here, tap on these three dots and say input binding. Okay, so now we're going to map our keys. Everything is the same except C stick is your right analog stick. ZL is L2. So this is L2. This is ZL. ZR is R2. Swap screen I've set to L3. It's just the same as my DS, my Nintendo DS controller setting. And then the settings menu. So here I've set to L2. So now we do actually have a menu button, and we're going to set it to L2 so that we got it similar to the other systems. Okay, so now exit the menu and open a game. I am going to open Sonic Lost World. Okay, so there's that screen layout that I chose. Now, if we press L3, it's going to swap those screens, which I like. If you want to change it, you can go into the menu and you can go into layout settings and change it. Another thing that you need to do, so once you're in the game, press here, go into settings, and you will want to hide input buttons. So tap here. This won't be ticked. You will want to, so if I untick that, see there's all the input buttons. So we go back into menu, we say settings, and we say hide input buttons, and that will get rid of those for us. And that's it. 3DS looks lovely at a 2x resolution. You can improve the performance by closing background apps. If that doesn't work, try set this resolution to 1x. Doesn't look great, but you can do that. All right, moving right along to our Mupen 64 emulator. It's called M64 Plus FZ. This is the Retroid version. When it opens up, you want to say allow access to photo and media, and then you'll want to press on this plus button. You'll say start file picker. So on my external drive, I go to Retroid Pocket Games, go to ROMs. This is the Mupen 64, so this is N64 games. So we scroll down, go to N64, I say use this folder, allow, and it's going to do a scan. Let's just let it do its thing. It does take a little while. If this is your first time doing the scan, it's actually going to take very long. Okay, now tap the three stripes at the top left, go to Profiles, and go to Controller, and go to New. So I've created a controller here called Aiden. Let's go to Edit. So you'll say New, I'm going to edit mine. So what you're going to do is you're going to tap on a button, so here, and you give it the corresponding button. So we just go through. S is start, L will be L1, R will be R1. So Z I've actually mapped to L3, because I've done that on a couple of platforms now, so I'm just keeping that to L3. And then R is just R1, A obviously to A, B to B. The C stick is your right joystick, so right to right, down to down, left to left, up to up. This is your left joystick, up, down, left. Okay, so now we've mapped the Aiden profile. Now we want to assign it. So under Profiles, we want to go to Select Profiles. And then under Controller Profile, you see that I've selected Aiden. Now we have mapped and set our controller correctly for N64. So now we want to completely remove the on-screen overlay. When you open a game, there's an overlay of all the buttons. We want to remove that completely. So what we want to do is we go in here, we go to Settings, get the drop down there. We go to touch screen. We go to button opacity, and you'll see I've set that to 0. I think it's by default set. By default, it's set to about 80 or 60. So you just bring that all the way down to 0. So you say OK there. Let's go back. So with this system, because there's so many buttons and that, you will need to do the left swipe thingy, and that's where your menu is, and that's where your save slots and all that are. I haven't figured out yet. Maybe if you know how, if there is a way, just let me know in the comments, a way to map a save button. Because it's using so many buttons, it's a bit tricky with this one. And with this one, performance, you can go in here and tweak some things for performance, but I would just say to keep it simple, make sure that your background apps are closed. You can go in here and set your resolution. You can go, the display resolution is currently set to maximum. I think this might be tweaked for a handheld, so maximum is 640 by 480. You can go right down to that, but then I think the visuals are not going to be great. Let's have a look at that. Yeah, you see, that's terrible. That really is shockingly bad. So that's not really usable. So I would say, the maximum that you would probably want to drop it to, or the minimum you probably want to drop it to, is 480 by 360. But I think the Retroid Pocket can mostly handle these games at full resolution. Now moving on to Ether SX2. This is a PS2 emulator. It is a very nice emulator, but there has been a little bit of drama lately. So I've put in my written notes, I said NB, at the time of writing this, there's been some drama with the developers of this app. The Play Store version is being sabotaged, so for now rather use the Retroid version and disable automatic updates in your settings until this matter has been cleared up. I'm trying to remember which version. I used the Retroid version. You can also download a version from their website. I'm not sure which ones are dodgy. I know Mr. Sojana went deep into this and explains exactly which ones to download, but because we do have the Retroid one, we know that that's locked to when they set this up in the factory. So that's the one that I'm using. Okay, but let's get into how this app works and how to get it set up correctly. So when you open this, it'll actually list the file types that will work within this emulator. So when you first open it and you haven't listed your games, just take notes of those file types. Then we want to add a game directory. So there should be a button here saying add game directory. So we go in there, you navigate to your games, and then tap use this folder, say allow, it's going to ask you for permission, and then try and open a game. I won't do that now because I've already gone through these steps to set up for this setup guide. So you try open a game, it's going to ask you for a BIOS file. So you navigate to your file system on your device and you get the BIOS file. I'll put the name on the screen, it's very long. Find that BIOS file that you have, then it will allow you to play your games. All right, now we want to actually set this up. So we tap on the three stripes at the top left, and then we go to app settings. So we go here to app settings, then we go to the general. So at the top, you'll see all these menu items. So we go to general, we go to save state. So we go down, save states on shutdown. So whenever you have this option available to you on these emulators, just enable it, because then when you close the app, so get in the habit of actually closing the game, not just pressing the home button. That's something I've learned over time using it, because I kept pressing home and then I wouldn't get the benefit of save states on shutdown. So you must just shut the game down and then it'll automatically create a save state for you. Then we go to graphics over there. We go to GPU renderer. Now, most games that I saw on that spreadsheet that I keep mentioning, they use Vulkan mostly. But this is one of those performance things where you can switch between Vulkan and OpenGL to get varying performance. But Vulkan mostly is the way to go. Then under graphics, we go to threaded presentation. You'll see that I've got upscale multiplied to 1 times native. You can try upscale, but this device is already going to be a perfect PS2 emulator, so you don't want to push the resolution. So we are scrolling down to threaded presentation. It's down here. Yes, and I've enabled that. And then we want to go to advanced, and this is another one of those things that I just took someone's word on it, and we scroll down to, it's also to do with the threads, and software rendering threads, and we go all the way to 5 threads. I'm guessing it has something to do with maximizing the usage of the CPU on this device. Now we want to go to our controller settings. So again, we go to those 3 stripes, the hamburger menu selection button at the top left. Then we go to controller settings, and we want to set up our controller. So the first thing that you want to do is go to touchscreen, go to touchscreen controller view and say none, so that you don't have that touchscreen controller on your screen. Then we go to port 1 and we go here to controller type and we say DualShock 2. That's just sort of like a generic Xbox type controller setup. Now I want to manually set up each button. So we go, you can do automatic controller mapping, but I just never trust it because I never end up liking the way that they've mapped it. So the D-pad, obviously that's going to be fine. But again, I usually just go and I check. So it's 16. Yeah, 16. Okay, so they've done that correctly. Okay, yeah, so those are fine. Then we go to triangle. We want to just make sure that is in fact triangle. Circle, make sure it is in fact circle. 97, yeah, it is correct. Cross, want to make sure it's cross. Square, we want to make sure 99. 99, okay, that was correct. So select. So all of these look good. Start. You know, this was set up generically for the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. It is the Retroid version, but I'm just always skeptical. I always want to do it. I'm a bit of a control freak. Okay, so L1, left bumper. So 102, yeah, correct. That's L2, so we go L2 there. R1, R2, just make sure. L3, so here you've just got to make sure, because if you accidentally slide here, so L3, if I accidentally slide it before I push it, it's actually going to register the axis 0. So we need to go here and just make sure you get button 106. If you are being a control freak like me, just make sure that that is correct. Now it auto maps this analog toggle to button 110, and I went through and I couldn't find which button is 110. So, you know, auto mapped analog toggle to that. So I'm just going to leave it. Left stick up, left stick right, left stick down, left stick left, right stick up, right stick right, right stick down, right stick left. Okay, and that's that. Now, PS2 does use all your buttons and keys. You know, you're going to need your R2s and L2s and L1s and R1s and all that, because I went in and I played Half-Life, and then I realized, because I mapped the menu to the L2 like I did in all the other systems, and then I realized I needed that, and then I mapped the L3 for a hotkey. So there are hotkey options here. What you can do, and what I did discover, is you can do dual key hotkey setups with this emulator. So it could get confusing. So something that you just have to remember. But if you decide you want to do a menu hotkey and you want to do two keys at the same time. Now in RetroArch, I'm going to recommend that you use the two L3 and R3s together for exiting a game. But what you can do here, because it's similar, exiting the game, going to menu, because you go to menu to exit anyway. So open pause menu, you can do two buttons like that, and you'll see it registered both buttons. Now I've actually made a hotkey for going to the menu in PS2. But obviously now you've got to remember that. So whether I remember that or not, I'm not sure. I also like to have quick loads and quick saves. Maybe I'm going to do it, because on RetroArch, the way I've done it is I've done L3 and R1 for a save. So let's go to quick save. Let's try it. There we go. And a quick load is L3 and L1. So let's go. And then I know a lot of people, I've avoided this in this tutorial, is a fast forward. A lot of people do like fast forward. So you again could do this. You could go L3 and R2. Now you've got a fast forward button. So that's something that you could do and might be beneficial in a system like PS2 that's already using all the buttons. So now you've got dual key hotkeys. So with this system, like I mentioned, you can switch between OpenGL and Vulkan. You can use PAL games. It was a console system, so obviously, you see this app is supposed to be free with no ads, and now I see I've got an advert, which means this did auto-update. So this is fresh news, so it's something that I'm still busy figuring out. So I think you're going to have to go into your Android settings and stop your whole Android system from updating its apps, and then rather update your apps manually until this drama is sorted out. What a pain. Anyway, that is what it is for now. Okay, so that is the bulk of the work. In my written guide, you'll see at this point in the video, I said, and a reminder which I've already mentioned to you, is in order to update or to reinstall apps that appeared in the beginning stages when you first set up the device, you can go to Handheld Settings. You can go to Advanced, re-enter Setup Wizard. It'll say it's not going to delete your info, and you can go back into the Setup Wizard and go get those Retroid apps, which I think I'm going to do to get the older version of this Ether-SX2, because I'm worried now it's not going to perform very well. And then I've like a stuck record now, but I have that GitHub page that is very helpful, which gives you emulator settings, actual settings that you can use. And then also it's called the RP3 Plus compatibility sheet. And that's a Google sheet that will guide you through games that work really well and the settings that worked for them. So for instance, I think in this video I tested Metroid Prime, and I think I even said earlier on in this video that Metroid Prime wasn't working, and then I stopped recording and went to bed, and while I was playing some games in bed, I checked those settings. So I switched to Vulkan in the GameCube emulator and changed a few other little settings, and now GameCube is actually working perfectly. So I have changed the written guide to mention that. So this video is already out of date, as I've learned a couple of new things. So check out the written guide for a bit of an update on GameCube emulation. All right, so now RetroArch has been downloaded. Very important to always remember throughout this thing is to go to your configuration file once you've done anything and save new configuration. So if you've changed anything, it saves. Otherwise, you're going to go through this whole process and you're going to lose your changes. So the first thing that I want to do is just update everything. So let's go into this core updater. And I want to, I don't want to install update cores yet. I want to update the core info files. I want to update the assets. Not controller profiles, not cheats. Databases we can update, not the overlays, but this one, the shaders. I just want to update all of these so that we're ready to roll. Okay, so that's updated. It's nearly done, and it's done. Okay, then you want to go to this cog, the settings, and we want to do the user interface. And I'm going to change the theme to a theme that I like. So we're all on the same page. Then we go back to this home button and we go to save configuration file. Be careful not to do anything else. Save new configuration, and then we go back to home, scroll to the bottom, quit RetroArch, and then we go back into RetroArch. So now we've got this beautiful old PlayStation theme that I really like. So this gets us started. All right, so let's get into setting up RetroArch. So the first thing that we want to do is go to the online updater, and we want to go to the core downloader, and we want to download all the cores. So you'll notice that my A button, so we're going to do that just now. All right, so let's go through. You'll see on my written notes, there's a guide there on what to do here. I'm going to do the Final Burn Neo emulator. That should do CPS 1 and 2, but then we can also get this Final Burn Alpha 1 for the CPS 1 and 2, and we can see which one works best there. Then for MAME, we're going to go to 2003 plus. We're going to get the MAME one there. Then for Atari, we want a 2600. We're just going to get the Stellar one. Then for Atari 5200, the A5200 Pro System for Atari 7800. And you can just go through my list on my written guide and follow this through. We're going to speed this process up now. Okay, so all our cores are installed. Now, you can go and map your input controls. But I'm going to leave that because it's already, so if you go in here and you go to inputs, you can actually map the inputs, but it's already automatically mapped your menu controls to, whoops, gone into the wrong thing here, to the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, which is basically this, it's the same thing. The other thing that I want to just show you is confirm quit. We don't want confirm quit because we don't want to have to press the quit button twice. And I'll show you what that is now when we create the shortcuts, the hotkeys. So if you have chosen to go with the Xbox controller like I have, it's going to be confusing when you go into the menu and suddenly the OK and cancel buttons are different. So at the moment I need to press A to get into a menu, and that's confusing when I've just been in my Android system and this is technically the X button, which is my OK button, and so things are swapped around. So we go into menu control, and so whoops, it's kind of counterintuitive, but we have to unselect that. So once that is unselected, I now need to press A to get back. So that kind of just unifies things. Once you go into the game will be protected, it will be normal, Nintendo game system, but when you go into the menu, it'll be same as the rest of your device. So if you have gone for the Xbox controller like me, you need to do this little step to make sure that it all feels unified and nice. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go into settings. You'll see when you cross over, it'll show you which menu you're in. We're going into settings. Now we want to map our hotkeys. These are shortcuts that will allow you to navigate the RetroArch easily. You can always change your hotkeys. You can always go back and say, I don't agree with Aiden, this was incorrect. So just go back to this part of my video and then just map it to something else, But I recommend something that you are familiar with. So what I've done is I've copied my Linux system. So all my old games that I've done for the channel that I've mapped to certain keys, I've just followed that rule. And also Amberelec have exactly the same setup. So I've basically copied them. Okay, so hotkeys. So we're already in settings. We're going to input, and then we're going to hotkeys where we are now. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is choose our hotkey enable. So we go down here and we go to hotkey enable. This is the button that we're going to press that's going to work in conjunction with the other button. So you press one button plus another button to enable a hotkey. Now in RetroArch, in Linux, it's select, but your select button is here, so that's not really going to work. So I'm going to use the L3 button here to be my hotkey enable. So let's go in here and we just press down L3. There we go. Now that's our hotkey enable button. Now, a lot of guys, and especially for these old games where, there's a lot of talking and stuff, like when I play Castlevania, I like to just fast forward through some of the talking. So we go in here and we say R2. Oh, we've got to press and hold. I like that because, it kind of makes sense. Fast forward on this side, progression of time. All right. This is the fast forward toggle, so it switches it on and off, which I prefer. If you want to fast forward hold, you can rather enable it to press and hold, fast forward, let go, and all that. But I like to just kind of start it and then stop it. So that's the way I like to do that. Slow motion, I don't really like a slow motion. Load state. So this will be this button plus L1. And so let's do that. L1. Save state is going to be R2. So we go in there and we say R1. Press R1. Full screen toggle, not going to do that. You want to close content because it says here closes the current content, but you may lose your changes. So we want to say quit RetroArch. So that's going to close RetroArch. But what's going to happen is once we've got Daijisho set up, it's going to just quit RetroArch and jump back to Daijisho. So we want to map quit RetroArch. I think that's the way to go. So we select it. What I'm going to do for quit RetroArch is I'm going to do the two L3 and R3 buttons. So we're going to select that and we're going to press down R3 because remember this is our hotkey enable. So that plus that one is now going to shut RetroArch. You're able to go up and down to save slot. So save slot plus, save slot minus, which will change the number of the save slots. So if you're not sure if it's saving over and over on the same save slots and you won't be able to go back onto those saves, you can set this. So what I do is I do save slots plus I set it to D-pad up. So L3 plus D-pad up is going to do save slot up. L3 plus D-pad down is a new save slot down, save slot minus. All right, you can do rewind. I'm not a big fan of rewind. Some people like a show FPS so that if you want to see the performance of your game. So I'm going to set that to Y button. So we're going to, because that's how it is in AmberLX. So I'm going to keep that format. Here we've got volume control, so we don't need any of that. Next is previous, this shouldn't be an issue. We're going to set menu toggle to X, which is again is the same as AmberLX. And that is it. Some people like to use run ahead, but you know, that's for another day. And so those are our hotkeys. Our hotkeys are now set up. Hooray. Now we're going to go to settings, saving. So we're already in settings. Now we're going to go down to saving and we're going to control how the game saves games. So let's have a look at what I've said here. So auto save state, enable. So what that's going to do is, you know, like if you've got a RG35XX or something, the developers actually enabled this when you set your game up and you install the firmware. This is already enabled. So when you close the game, it just restarts into that save state. So this is an auto save state. And then we can also say load save state automatically. So when it opens up, you will automatically get that save state. And then just a note, for that to work, you need to use your quit RetroArch so that it'll do that save. If you press your home button, like I mentioned in previous parts of this video, I got into the habit of pressing home button, but then I wasn't getting the benefit of that save state thing because the game would eventually just shut down when I shut down Android or whatever, but it would be running in the background, you know, and so I'd never get the benefit of that auto save. And then another thing that I like to do is increment save state index automatically. So what this does is it incrementally adds your save states. You don't have to have that, but I like to know that if I accidentally save something, I can go back to the last save state before that. Maximum auto increment save states to keep. Let's say 10. I don't know. Okay, so that's the way to go. All right, so the next thing we want to do is remove so this RetroArch, it's set up for touchscreen devices, so it's going to automatically have that overlay of the touchscreen controls. So we want to remove that, so what we do is we go to settings, we're already in settings, and we want to go to on-screen display. So let's go down, on-screen display, let's select that on-screen display overlay. Display overlay, no. We just disable that, and now that is done. So we're not going to get that overlay. The next thing you want to do is enable retro achievements. So within settings, we're going to go down to achievements. We select that, select it there, and now you're going to put your username and password. We're just going to skip through this through the magic of editing. Okay, so my username and password's in here. I've already done these settings. So it is hardcore mode. I'm going to leave that off. Leaderboards enabled. So in leaderboards, you just go in here and it will be disabled to just enable it. Challenge indicators, I like to have that on. Rich presence, yes, I have that on. Achievement badges, yeah, pops a little badge on the screen. It's very cool. Unlock sounds, yes, it's just fun to have those things. And then I like to have the screenshots. It just saves screenshots at critical moments when you do a save state or critical moments in the game. So I quite like that. I like to have that as a little history. And that is pretty much it. But the next step is the most important step. Go back to main menu, go down, go to configure. Aha, you see I tapped quit RetroArch, but fortunately I've already saved this. So you got to be very, very careful. So there is a perfect example why you have to save this thing. So I'd already completed it and pressed the configuration. So you go configuration file, save current configuration. Do not touch the screen like I just did, because you will lose all of that work that you just did. Anyway, okay. And then if you want to exit, you can either go quit RetroArch or push your hotkey. Now you have exited RetroArch. So let's get straight into setting up Daijisho. So I've got to download it. So let's go to the Play Store. Let's look for Daijisho. There it is. Install. Open. So the first thing we're going to do is download platforms. So these are all the game systems that we want to play. You can go through and choose what you want. You can always remove. You can always add later. I'm just going to add the systems that I specifically know I have and want to play and that I can do for this example. And so you can go through here and choose what you want. So there my systems are downloaded. So already downloading the artwork for each platform. So you'll see there as you go through, there's a little backdrop for each platform. There's Game Gear, that old system. Just get familiar with how it works. You'll see that I'm navigating through the systems with the R2 and L2. Then if you, the main menus are actually these little texts at the top here. R1 and L1 will navigate you through those. So you navigate through there with R1, L1, and then once you're in your systems, you can scroll through here. Once you set your widgets up, you can scroll through there with R2 and L2. So that's how that works. So we've downloaded our platforms. Let's go into settings and get right into it. One thing that I like to do is go to settings and library. And I like to enable aggressive scraping. You might not want to do that. This might create incorrect artwork for a specific game, but I don't like to have blank spaces. I don't like to have no artwork, so I just do aggressive scraping. Then we want to choose a wallpaper for our theme, so let's go to appearance. Let's go to download platform wallpapers pack. My favorite platform wallpaper is the BB1 dark. I like a dark theme, so what I do is I download this and then I add I set it to the dark theme. So this plus a dark theme looks really nice. Okay, there it is. It's loaded. Now we stay in here and I'm going to set this to the dark theme. Now if you go back to, we can use our L1. Now you'll see that I've got the dark theme and I've got this BB1, which I quite like. It looks nice. So there we go. Then the next thing that I want to do is I want to just show you where to change the button sounds. So go to video and sounds under settings. And you can make button sounds. So I like the button sound. So let's just turn that on so you can hear it. So that's back. That's select. That's moving around. So I like it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Just remove it there. And then under settings, you can actually set a home page. So if you go to settings, navigation. So we go here. A lot has changed with this new updates. We go to home page and you can set where Daijisho defaults to. So once you've got this set up, you'll find that widgets is probably the best place to default to. So if you set it to widgets, now if you go back, so my A button is my back button. If I go back, it defaults to widgets. So you'll see there, that is my home page. All right, so let's get straight to it. For the example, I'm going to find the NES system. First we need to do is press this pen over here, and we want to make sure that Daijisho has selected the right core. So I've downloaded the RetroArch 64 from the website and it's chosen Nestopia. You can trust that. That's a good choice, actually. I recommended the FCEUMM, but actually Nestopia is fine. So we can actually just leave it at that. And now we can go to paths and we can say add more. And we go to my 16 bits is stored on my device. So I've dragged it in there. We go to our Retro Pocket Games folder. We go to ROMs. And then we find the NES. There we go. And we say use this folder. This will now sync those ROMs with this menu item with that call. And so it lines it all up. But what is cool about this, what is pretty cool, is that you can go in here, and let's say it's a higher end system and you want to get fancy. Like for instance, GameCube, there's like 3 or 4 emulators that you can download. I think it's here in detail, edit item. So you can go in here and you can actually change the core for this specific game, custom player. So we can actually set, it's playing a video in the background. You can set the core per game, which is really nice. So if you get really fancy about this and you research a game, so like for instance, I got into Metroid Prime on GameCube, and that specifically ran well on the MMJR version of the Dolphin emulator. And so instead of setting all my GameCube games to that, I can just set the GameCube, the Metroid Prime game, to that emulator. You're not going to have too much hassles with this sort of thing, but anyway. Okay, so let's test a game. I'm going to test Adventure Island here, one of my favorites. This nag screen. So I've left this nag screen. I think all the setup guides and recommendations that I saw online disabled this. But the thing is, if you press back the home button, the Android home button, to get out of the game and to go back to Daijisho, and you choose another game, it's actually going to keep that, it's going to store that game that's running in the background and open there again, and it won't close it. So it won't do a force shutdown. So it's up to you. You can, if it does do that, then you can use your quit keys, but I just find this a little bit easier. Okay, here we go. So I've actually opened this before, and you see it did the auto save load. So if, let's say, for instance, I go here, it looks fantastic on the screen, I have to say. So now if we go out of the game and we go back into the game, it's going to load where we last left off. So that's really nice. So that looks great. It's performing great. Daijisho linked it up with no problem. So let me now go back to a system that sometimes causes me issues, is Neogeo. I always have little niggles with Neogeo. So let's go in here. Daijisho has selected this one. So let's see if that works, that emulator. So let's find my Neogeo ROMs in Neogeo. Use this folder, allow, select it here, sync. All right, let's go in here and let's, not all these games work all the time. So let's just see, whoops, let's try this one. Yeah, there you go. I got a bit of a horrible title screen, but it should eventually work. There you go. And there you go. So Daijisho really does do a great job of choosing the right emulators, the right cores for each game. And so you will just go through and you will do this for everyone. So just have a quick look, see, okay, so there he's chosen the Mupen thing that I've used. So now I'll go to the N64. So this is now a non-RetroArch game. So this will be a good example. We go into the N64s onto my external because it's a bit bigger. So we go here, we go to N64 there, say use this folder, say allow, say sync. We go in here. All right, so let's choose a game that I know does work. I think Castlevania is a pretty safe bet. And there you go. It works. It chose the right emulator. So it's almost always right. So if it does by if it creates some issue and you are struggling, just go in here with this little pen key and have a look at the emulators. Like go through all the different emulators for that. You will eventually find the one you're looking for. And that's pretty much Daijisho. Let's go to the little bits and pieces that I recommended for this platform, for Daijisho. So again, just to reiterate about Boxart, let's go to one of the systems that I've now downloaded. When you're in the list view, so I like the grid view for whatever reason, I'm a weirdo, but most people like the list view. It's very nice because you can toggle between artwork. So there's a nice screenshot of the game, and then that's the title screen. So that's quite nice to be able to just toggle between those. And then if you have just started and it's not syncing, it's not downloading the thumbnails, just restart your game. But also remember, if you go through now and you set all these up quickly in quick succession, it's going to take some time, especially if your internet's slow. So just be patient. All right, so let's add some widgets, activities. So this has got a few things. Let's just add them all. Activity, item played today, activity, item viewed today, activity, item played in one period, activity, item viewed in one period. And so this is like if you want to track, if you're gaming too much and you want to make sure that you're not doing too much, or just kind of keep an eye on your gaming experience. This is the last game played. So that's quite a nice little one. And then moving on to pin and play. This is the one that I would use a lot. So press and hold, pick an item. So you can now find a game. So for instance, okay, I haven't loaded everything. So I'm just going to go just any old game. If you know me, this is like my favorite game. So I'll pin that. Let's move it. I want to move it to here. There, please. There. So I move it to there. I just want that as one of my favorite games. So you can pin and play a whole lot of games. So all my recent games. So I'm going to add God of War once I've synced that up, and I'm going to add my GameCube, my Metroid Prime on there. Those are going to be my main games. You got a random picker, so you can do entire collection from favorite items, from recently played, from newly played. Random picker. RSS feed, not sure you can add an RSS feed for a podcast or whatever, I'm not sure. I suppose if there's a good like gaming suggestion RSS feed, that'd be quite nice to do. Image block, this is literally just to add an image. Retro achievements, so there I'm going to show you how to log into Retro Achievements now, and then an app shortcut, so you can shortcut to your apps, which I'll also show you now. So here we go. Please log in. We need to go to settings. So in settings, there's retro achievements. So now this will universally sync up your retro achievements with everything. Oh, autofilled through Google. Good to know my information is safe. Okay, so we've signed into retro achievements. Let's go back here. I've got a lot of games that I just opened and closed, but I play Sonic the Hedgehog a lot, but I have only 6.3% complete. Also, Adventure Island, I was playing a lot at one point for some reason, only 6.7. Highlights. So now we got all items. We can do favorites, so you can like kind of all your favorite games. Recents, so these are the recently played games. And then newly added games. And obviously now with just having started setting up my library, I'm going to have a lot of them. And then apps. A clever thing that this developer did was put all your apps in the front end. So at the moment, I haven't done the final thing there. So if you go into Retroid Launcher, you can't access your apps from here. So you have to go out of the Retroid Launcher, go to your apps, and then go back into the Retroid Launcher. Daijisho, once you have Daijisho set up, you never leave it. So that brings me on to my final point is once you have got Daijisho set up and you're very happy with the way that you've got it set up, you're happy with everything, you're happy that all the games are syncing correctly, so do that first. I know that mine is going to work, so I'm going to do this now. But then once everything's working fine, you've been using it for a couple of weeks and you're happy, now go into settings and go to apps and notifications. Scroll down here to advanced and go to default apps and your home app. So you can now set your home app to either the Retroid Launcher or the Daijisho. Now, you see it already goes to Daijisho. So now, if I'm in a game, I'm busy with a game, I'm playing a game. So you see, I often do this, it's a bad habit. But anyway, you go out, it's not going to go to Android anymore, it's going to go to Daijisho. So now you've got the seamless integration, and it will also open up to Daijisho when you shut the system down. So for part 3, we are looking at a number of things, and this will be a little bit shorter than part 1 and 2. The first thing is my retro shaders and filters for my retro games. So as I was playing it, I realized the screen is beautiful, but when you use a retro shader, because the screen is such a high resolution screen, the shaders make it look even more realistically old. So, when we've got these old, cheaper screens on our Anbernic devices, the screen in and of itself gives it a retro feel because they are a little bit old and outdated, like my RG280V. It's probably why I enjoy it. But with such a high-end screen, something was missing with these retro systems. And so I started fiddling with shaders. So I've gone through this. This is totally subjective, and a lot of people will disagree with the way that I've set this up, but this just looked good to me. This device has enough headroom to be able to do this. What I mean by that is it's got enough processing power to handle all these shaders. So some of these I'm going to add 2 shaders or a shader and a video filter. So let's go through it, and I'm going to show you the systems that I set up with some retro filters. So a couple of housekeeping notes. To remove a video filter, simply navigate to the settings video filter and press start to remove the video filter. So these are just things to reference back as you go through this. To remove a shader, simply navigate to the quick menu, shaders, video shaders, and then just disable that. This is specifically for RetroArch. Play around with these, and once you have decided on the ones you like, remember to save as described below. Shaders and filters are each saved differently. Shaders are saved in the shaders menu, and filters are saved in the overrides menu. So I will be referencing that throughout this guide. Okay, so let's navigate to NES. So what we're going to do is we're going to open a game, and then we're going to get into the RetroArch menu that way. So I'm going to press my L3 and my X button to get into the menu. And then we're going to go to quick menu shaders. So you're immediately in the quick menu. So let's scroll down to shaders, and we're going to obviously enable video shaders. Then we're going to go down to load. We're going to go to shaders GLSL, and we're going to scroll down to CRT, and we're going to add CRT Geom. Here we go. Now what this does is it also adds a curve to it. So I don't want too much of a crazy curve. So we're going to increase the screen curvature radius in shader parameters. So let's go back. There we go. We don't have to go back. We just go down here to shader parameters. We go to the curvature radius, and we actually increase that radius, and I'm going to increase it to 4.8. So it's very slight. You'll see in the background here, you'll see a change. So it just creates a very slight curvature. And I'm actually going to stretch my aspect ratio to 4:3. So in order to change the aspect ratio, we need to go out of shaders. But before we leave the shaders, let's save it. So we go here to save, simple presets, and we can save core presets. I'm just thinking this is NES. Yes, we can save this to the core. So we're going to say save core presets. Then we're going to go out of here. We're going to go across to settings. We're going to scroll down to video, and we're going to go to scaling. And I actually want to just increase the scaling ever so slightly to 4:3. So if we go, there we go, all the way to the top. We'll see it just stretches it ever so slightly, just to take up a little bit more of that screen real estate. To save the scaling, we actually need to go back to the quick menu, and then we go to core overrides. So here, overrides, and we go to, you can say save content directory overrides, save game overrides. If you just want it for this specific game, I'm going to say save core overrides. And now when we go back into the game, that's how it looks. It's got a very rich presence now, very saturated presence. It is a little bit darker, so you can brighten it up if you want, but I quite like that rich saturated look. It's got that slight curvature to it. To me, this just looks fantastic. There's going to be a little bit of aliasing on my lens now because it's actually creating that alias effect, which is where the pixels start to go all strange. But there we go. that to me just looks really cool. I really like it. So give it a go. Let me know if you like that one. Moving on to the next one. All right, so the next system we're going to adjust is Super Nintendo. So we're going to go into our menu shortcut there. And this is just a video filter. So we want to go out of the quick menu and we actually want to go into settings. And then we want to go down to video and we want to go to video filter. So we go down to video filter and I want to get one of these blog ones. It's called the Blog NTSC SNES Composite. So Blog NTSC SNES. So it's the first one here. We select that one and that is all. So what we want to do is go out of here and to save. We go to, so for the filters and the video settings and for aspect ratios, we save via content overrides. So so for content overrides, go into the quick menu, go down here to overrides, say overrides and say save game overrides, save content directory. I know that this is a core we can save to, so I'm going to save it to the core overrides. And now if we go back into the game, so this one is a little bit more subtle, but it gives a very slight CRT blur to it. Now, what you can do is combine this with the previous one and do that for your NES and your SNES games and any other games, and it gives it a really realistic CRT screen look. It gives it it's really kind of messed up, you know, but if you are into that very retro look, this is, I'm not sure if it's going to come across very well on YouTube, but let's get it in focus. It just gives it a very slight CRT blur, but this combined with that other one does look very good, and I'll show that to you now. So here's that previous blog filter plus the CRT shader. And SNES, I'm not sure, I haven't really experienced any trouble, but I don't play a super high amount of SNES on this console. But that really, it does look very authentic. I really like it. And, you know, if you really want to, you can stretch this to the screen as well. I think SNES can handle it. So now I'm setting up Sega Master System, and I'm actually setting it up exactly the same as the SNES. I'm adding the same shaders and filters, so you can check the written guide for that. But just to note that Sega Master Systems, Sega Mega Drive, Game Gear, they all use the same core. So don't save core preset because it's going to save it across all those platforms. You have to save content directory preset. So that's for the saving the shader. And then when you add the video filter and you go into save overrides, you need to save core directory, same game directory overrides. So save content directory overrides, so that you don't save it over all those other systems for Sega. And there we go. There's my super retro filter for Sega Master System. I just love it. I really like it. So now for Sega Genesis, I have done things a little differently, which you don't necessarily have to do. You can do these pretty much all the same as the SNES. It's such a great retro setting. But what I have set up for Sega Genesis or Sega Mega Drive is, okay, let's go down to shaders. And I'm going to use the beam shader here. So there we go, down to our CRT shaders. And I'm going to use this one, CRT beam. It just does a better job of evening out the pixels because it's got a slightly more stronger like cross-line overlay. So we're going to save that. Again, we need to save that to the content directory presets. All right, so we go out of there. And then I'm going to change that. So this is controversial. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to go to video. And I'm going to change the scaling. I'm going to go down here and change the scaling to 16:9 or full screen. So I'm going to fill it to the size of this system, so the screen. And then we need to go back into quick menu and just go to core overrides and just save that that video filter, save content directory overrides specifically for these Sega systems. Now, there is a widescreen hack that you can use for Sega Genesis, but I just like this because it's a cure-all, because the widescreen hack doesn't work for everything. So you can either go this route, or you can go into Daijisho and choose the different core for different games. So depending on how you want to do it. Daijisho does give you that alternative of choosing cores. So if you find that widescreen hack core works well, like for instance on Castlevania, if you test it and it works, you can go that route. But this for me is just a fix all. It's evened out all the pixels quite nicely. You can see the progress, not the progress bar, the player's energy bar is looking pretty even to me. The lettering's looking pretty even. He's looking pretty good. And I think that looks really nice. A nice 16:9 ratio for your Sega Genesis. So that's just, you don't have to do it like this. I'm giving a few options that you can try. So CPS 1, 2, and 3, we're using the same core for these. And so this is all going to be the same setting for this. So let's go into our settings and let's go first to add a shader. We're going to add that geom shader to this one. But what we're going to do is we're going to remove that curvature completely. So we're going to go here to shaders. We're going to add the CRT, that geom shader. Have I gone past it already now? There we go, geom. Now we're going to go down to the parameters, shader parameters, and we can actually set a curvature toggle. And we're just going to switch it off. So now we've got no toggle, no curvature. And we're going to save this. We're going to save this to the core so that it changes all my CPS systems. We're using the Final Burn Neo core. And then we're going to go to video settings video. And I want to go to scaling. And I'm going to scale this to, I found a specific scaling that worked pretty well, is 16:10. So I'm not stretching it fully. Bit of a black bar there, so I didn't want to do all the way 16:9, just to not overstretch it. I have to save this under quick menu. Go to overrides and we go to save core overrides. So now that should have saved that. And if we go back now, I'll zoom in the edit as well here, but this looks pretty smooth. Like it doesn't look like I've stretched it at all. And we've got a nice sort of retro feel going here with the curved edges, curved corners, sorry. All right, so Game Boy, I see that I've actually stretched the aspect ratio, so let's see how it looks. I actually prefer get the perfect pixels, so I'm not sure why I said that. So I'm going to go through what I said in my notes and let's see how it looks. All right, so there's two options here. You can either go for a video filter or you can add the shaders. So the shader option is like this. We go to the shaders, we enable video shaders, we go to load, and the shader that I wanted to do was, load, shaders, and we go down to handheld because there's one specifically for these handheld devices. Then we're going to go to this console border folder. And the one that I chose was DMG4X. So let's go down to DMG4X. And then for this, but I'm not going to save it because I want to change it so I can show you the other one. And for this one, what I did was I did this scaling aspect ratio, we went to full. Okay, so now that I kind of forgot what I did in my notes, and now that I see it, there is kind of method to my madness because this little screen does look quite good. It looks like a Game Boy, and then you've got the borders, so it fills up the screen with this sort of Game Boy look. And even though you've got the horizontal, which is never going to fully look like a Game Boy, with this high resolution screen, it's able to render that old look very, very well. So I'm just going to try and zoom in as close as I can. And you can see it's got a real nice shader to it. It's even got like the shadow on the back of the screen as if it were a Game Boy. And this light, it looks real. So this is a very nice setup. I think I'm actually going to save this one, but I'm going to quickly show you the other one. So for me, Game Boy, it's all about authenticity and looking as like 80s as possible. But if this is too much for you, so what we can do now is we can, I'm just going to close this. And then what we're going to do is we are going to add a filter. We go into settings, video. We go down to video filter and we choose so it's the Game Boy 3X DMG filter. So let's go out of here. Let's go back into the game. So that's also a nice retro look. This has always been my setting on all my lower end games because the filters use up less processing power, I think. So that's quite nice. It gives that sort of dot matrix look on it. So that's a good option. If you don't want all the borders and you want a slightly bigger screen. So while I'm busy doing this, I just want to show you for this specific game, the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color use the same core. So when you save your preset, whether it's the overrides for the filter or to save the preset for the shader, you must save it to content directory. Otherwise, it's going to save it throughout the cores. And now I need to save my aspect ratio changes, which you save the aspect ratio and the video filters you save under overrides. So we go here, we say save not core overrides, save content directory overrides. So now that'll be saved. When I open it again, it will be there again. Okay, moving on. Okay, so Game Boy Advance obviously again looks smooth, looks nice, but it doesn't look retro. So we're going to go into the menu. We're going to scroll down to get a shader. We're going to get into, I've already enabled the video shaders. We're going to go to load, shaders GLSL. We're going to go down to the handheld ones again. And we're going to go down to LCD. So LCD grid V2 GBA color is the shader that we're going to choose. We're going to save that to core. And let's go out of here. Let's go into the game. Now all that does is it just adds that retro sort of a grid screen, the old Game Boy Advance. But what's nice is it's stretched to the size of the screen. It's the right aspect ratio, but it's really lovely on there. So I don't want to mess this up like the Game Boy with any weird borders, because I just think that looks absolutely stunning. So I'm very happy with that. Okay, so the last one I'm going to show is Atari 7800, just because it's one of my favorites. I mostly just use Atari 7800 to play this old Gallagher game. But this again, I just, when you're in the game, it's all smooth and great, but it doesn't have that sort of take me back to the 80s feel. So let's go into the menu here, scroll down. This is in our quick menu. Go down to shaders. Video shaders are enabled. And we're going to go to that geom one again. So we're going to go load. We're going to go shaders. We're going to go to CRT. Then we're going to go scroll down to that geom shader again, CRT geom. Then I'm going to change the parameters. We are going to increase that curvature to 4.3. So let's go to that radius and we're going to increase it to 4.3. There we go. And then we're going to save this. This is just only this uses this core. So let's say save core presets. Let's go into the game. I seem to remember trying to stretch it, but I think I decided just to stick with that. You barely notice the curvature, but it just gives it a nice retro look and feel. You could go a bit more crazy with this one because this is a very old game. But yeah, there we go. Nice little retro look for the Atari. So that's it for the screen settings for the retro emulators. Now moving on to gameplay and gameplay performance. I want to use this as an example. So I personally picked this device up and just started playing it, and I honestly didn't do a lot of gameplay testing. I just played the games that I was enjoying. Then I discovered the community-based compatibility sheets, and it gives you tweaks. So I made the section of the video where I explained how to set up Dolphin, and then I went and I started playing Metroid Prime, and it wasn't working. It wasn't working very well, and that's because I was using Dolphin for handheld. And now what I can do is I downloaded the fork, the MMJ fork that they recommended of Dolphin, and I enabled I said custom player for Metroid Prime, and I've now enabled MMJR fork for Metroid Prime, and then I tweak the settings according to this game. If I move on to another game, I'll tweak the settings for that, but I can change the emulators according to whatever they recommend on that spreadsheet. So as you go through this, as you work through this, don't get overwhelmed. That's also another reason why I'm not going to get really in the weeds with this part, is because as you go through a game, so for example, when I picked this up, I was very excited to make this a dedicated PSP device. So I've already worked through Assassin's Creed on this device, and I did the settings according to that spreadsheet. And I'm busy working through Chains of Olympus, and apparently I can get Ghost of Sparta working as well if I tweak it a little bit. And there's a PPSSPP Gold emulator, and you can also go in here and set the emulator specific to each game. So those are all the little tweaks that you can do. You can get really in the weeds with that. Just go to that spreadsheet and rather say to yourself, all right, I want to play this game. Okay, let's go see if it's on the spreadsheet. If not, let me go and play around with the settings. And you can go back into this guide where I've shown you all the sort of pieces of each emulator that will help you with performance. So that's all I'm going to say about gameplay performance is go to the spreadsheet, think of a game you want, and take it from there. Okay, and my mod recommendations. I was going to say something about the grip from a Retroid, and I watched Retro Game Core's video today reviewing their grip and the Hall sensors, and I just couldn't see a lot of value, especially considering the shipping costs getting stuff from Retroid. To get a grip and to get the Hall sensors to mod this device, unless you've already got stuff like that available, if you've got Hall sensors lying around, I don't really see the value of doing that. What I do like is I've ordered Sakura Modding's Xbox buttons. Because I'm such a fan of using this as a PSP device, I think the Sakura Modding Xbox buttons are going to be great for me personally. He's also lowered them to give it more of that Xbox sort of clicky button feel, which I'm not sure how well that's going to work, but anyway, I'll wait till that ships. And that's the only real mod I'm going to recommend for this. Then moving on to your questions. There were a couple of guys when I posted on my YouTube channel, I said, what must I put into this video? Here are some answers. So sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but Moises Perez asked how screen mirroring works. And unfortunately, not well. I went to my TV, I did some screen mirroring, and there was just massive amounts of stuttering. So in short, screen mirroring, not really an option. And I think if you've got a very fast router in your home, it might work. Then Schmertz Alex, so I'm guessing it's Alex Schmertz, asked if you can run Emulation Station on it, and the answer is no, this won't run Emulation Station. Emmanuel Nedalia asked for a full good-looking setup that he doesn't have to tweak. Manuel, this entire setup guide is for you. Unfortunately, this is a device you have to tweak, and the simplest route is to go the Daijisho route and set up all your emulators, but this is a 3-part series on how to set up the Retroid Pocket 3, so there is no quick fix. If you want a quick fix, get one of Anbernic's Linux systems, put Amberlec on it. You just install it and go. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe. See you in the next one.